Dear guests and distinguished participants, welcome and thank you for taking part in our third edition of Paperless Court webinar series. My name is David Mkrtchan. I'm e-Justice Development Manager with Synergy International Systems. Today's webinar will be the continuation of the webinar series on paperless courts, where we discuss how to transform court operations from paper-based environments to fully digital and electronic systems. In our previous webinars, we talked about how concrete aspects of court operations can be replicated digitally. We talked about e-filing, virtual court, e-summoning, online collaboration on cases by different court staff. We also covered topics such as document management, OCR, transcription of online hearings, and much more. Today, we will take a slightly different approach due to the evolution of our product supporting our implementations called Synergy eCase and the growing interest in low-code implementations by our colleagues and partners from all over the world. We have decided to dedicate this webinar to the process of creating electronic case management systems. What goes into that, what you need to prepare in advance, and how you design, build, and support your systems. Usually this process involves teams of software engineers from the vendor side where they engage in a lot of complicated programming activities. But today, we want to show you that it's not necessary to engage programmers and software engineers. Yes, they are needed, but we want to minimize their involvement in this process. We want to show you how a team of well-trained system analysts and administrators can create a fully operational case management system without coding it and also maintain it. Let me quickly share my screen with you to introduce you the program of today's webinar. So today, we will cover the following topics. We will define the knowledge in our database. We will create an electronic form of a notice. We will create the card in the case of this notice, describe the process of this notice, generate the legal template of the notice, set up the permissions for the court staff, configure the notifications, and track the notification log. So, to do that, today, I have with me my colleagues from Synergy International Systems, our presenters, Ms. Karine Gevorkyan and Mr. Khachatur Matevosyan. For your information, all participants, except speakers, will be muted during the webinar, but we encourage you to submit your questions via chat. We will dedicate a Q&A session at the end of our webinar. The language of the webinar will be in English, but we will post the Spanish and French translations on YouTube very soon. Some of you may have already seen our newsletter, but I'd like to congratulate the Synergy team for being awarded 2 new contracts for digitalizing justice systems in Sao Tome and Principe and in the Kingdom of Eswatini. The project in Kingdom Eswatini is going to be our second integrated case management system on the African continent after we did a similar project for Rwanda Ministry of Justice. The system in Sao Tome and Principe is going to be for the judiciary of the country, and it's going to be our step in our unique approach to island countries due to their specifics of doing business. In case any of you would be interested in learning more, please contact us and we'll be happy to have one-on-one discussions with you about your needs. Now let's dive into the webinar, and let's start with laying the field for proper implementations. It's obvious that whatever project you're undertaking, especially in the government sector and especially in the digital domain, as a beneficiary, one needs to have a proper game plan. Big component of this game plan is the preparation of your requirements. So let's hear from experts what the main points are in these requirements for preparing smooth implementation of your desired system. I would like Khachatur to comment on this first. Please, Khachatur.
Whenever we talk about the requirements for the implementation of the case management system, there are key components that are mandatory to be considered. So they can be grouped under several categories. So one thing which is must is to understand what type of data should be captured. Usually this is the data related to the cases. Then it's also important to have the process digitalized So the different processes which govern along the adjudication of the case in different institutions. And then the templates that are used within different institutions. So one thing is the data that is being captured, but another key component of requirements should relate to the legal templates, which are mandatory for the institutions. And then the different responsibilities, and starting from the organizational chart up to the detailed responsibilities of each user. And then we would say the part for the notifications and automations. So requirements can be many. You can have requirements in 500 or even thousands of pages, but logically, all those requirements, the functional requirements, are grouped under the categories that I mentioned. And having them well written and prepared are one of the key success factors of implementation of any case management system. David?
I appreciate the quick overview of the system, Khachatur. It's going to give a good background to our participants on our next step. So let's go step by step. You saw the document, right? The Khachatur that has shown. It is our requirement from the client, and it needs to go into the system. We know that it has its structure, its business process, permissions, automation, and notification rules attached to that. Where do we need to start to build the system for this document to become an electronic form? Karine, please help us.
Thank you, David. Allow me to share my screen and show you the document that was just displayed by Khachatur. This is a notice of filing, and we need, first of all, to analyze it. We are reviewing that there is a logo on the header of the file, which is the organization logo most probably, and then it is coming the name of the court. Under it is coming the address of the court, and then the notice of filing is the type of the notice that we are reviewing right now. Moving forward, there is the case number in here, there is the date of notice, and etc. So by analyzing fully the template that we receive from the client, what we do next is we annotate it, meaning that we are building the structure of it on a paper to understand what specific fields there should be captured in the notices and which part of them are going to be captured in the case. So after annotation, we have such image here. I have highlighted red those portions, which means that the dynamic data from the records, from the notice of the filing or from the case is going to be embedded in here. So wherever I want to file the notice of filing from, then I need to have the name of that specific court in here. Then I want to have the address of the court in here. Then in the middle it is coming the type of the notice, because sometimes it is a notice of filing, sometimes it is notice for the sessions and etc. And then this is the case number again, which is usually captured in the case right away, and here the date of the notice, which is specific for the notices. So after analyzing everything, what we get from here is that we need to add some more portion of information in the system to be able to describe and manage everything regarding the notices. Allow me to again go to the system and show what we are going to reach at the end. So this is the case, as Khachatur has explained to you. And then we are going to have another card, another group or folder, which will be holding all the notices within this case. For that reason, first of all, we need to go to the settings and define the knowledge. So Synergy eCase platform is famous because it is based on the knowledge that is given to the system. Then based on that knowledge, system operates with it and gives us possibilities to manage it actually. When I go to the entities, we see all the existing components which are already configured into the system, and now what we are going to do is to create a new entity here for the notices. For that, we just press on the create button, and then we name it accordingly. Let us call it something for the webinar notices. And I will highlight a few properties here so that everything will be generated correctly as per our needs. After I press create button, we are prompted with this beautiful builder, which allows actually the administrators to work with it like a graphical user interface for the database. Because whatever we create in here will automatically be transferred and reflected in the database, and there won't be any need for the administrators to go and to create, for example, tables in the database or to create columns in the database beforehand. Okay, let me explain the structure of this builder. So we have general information about the entity that we have created for the notices for our case, and then we have these sections for the group of fields which we are going to have for the notices in the database and in the system, of course. Automatically, whenever we create a new entity, our platform defines these system names, system fields, and then there is no need for administrator to go and recreate them again. They are not just simple fields because they are holding backend logic with them. For example, for the data created, whenever the instance of the notices is going to be created, automatically appropriate date is going to be captured in this field. The same is for the date updated, who created the instance of the notice, and then who updated the notice. What we are going to have are those sections for the group of fields, and this is a convenient way for the administrators to work with a lot of fields and to group them together. Now, again, let us remind what was the annotated version of the notice and what should go inside the notice entities. We can see that all the court name and address will be, of course, captured in the case. What we need to start with is the notice type. So let's define a notice type for the notices. Technically speaking, we would need additional table in the database to hold all possible notices types, and the next step for us would be to define the relationship between the notices and the notice type. So to save some time, I have already created the notice type simple list of values, and now I'm going to create the relation between the notices and the notice type. For that, I just create here a new relation. I choose lookup to another entity, and then I will have just to search the one that I have already created for the notice type. Let us find it, and we just need to name this field in for the notices as well. Let us call it notice type. Okay, and I will also mark it as an indexing field so that every single search or manipulation with the data will go through the Elasticsearch, which is of course making all the manipulations with the data much more easier and productive and faster, of course. So we create this field. Next, let us do other fields as well. What we else need to capture in here? So the next one specific for the notices will be the date of notice. Let us create the field as well. So I will press on the create and then choose the fields, and I will be prompted a big list of type of fields that are possible for the administrators to generate. And I think this is almost all type of fields that we have ever seen during our practice of many years. So let us choose the date one because it is the date of notice. We are naming it accordingly, and again I will mark it as an indexing one. The next field that I'm going to have here is for the participants of the notice, because they are going to be targeted parties from the system, from the case, who are going to receive the notice, and there might be many participants from the case. Then I will go to create another relation for the associative entity, which is actually from the perspective of the database is another table which is created in the database, again automatically without no efforts of the database developers. So I will name it accordingly and then create it. What I can do next, I can even create here a new section if I would need so. For example, for any additional information. And you can see that it will be reflected right away in here. So I have everything here now, nice and tidy. And at this stage, what we have done, we fully describe the knowledge about the notice, and the system already possesses this information. And again, to emphasize that for the database developers, there is no need to do anything else in the DB, because right after creating every single field and the entities, the tables corresponding to this knowledge will be automatically generated in the database. David?
That looked really easy, Karine. So we captured metadata. This is what we did here. In the past, developers would need to do this job by manually creating different scripts and objects in the database, which should have been run and executed in different environments. This should have been tested, and then front-end developers would start creating the forms using this database. But now our database component is ready, and now it should be transformed into front-end component and screens. In other words, visualization of the knowledge should happen that is going to be used by the end users. So how do we do this, Karine?
Thank you, David. Let me again share my screen and add one small additions in here as well. So what we have done, we have described all the fields of the notices, but we need also to have the relation between the notices and the case, so that in the future we are able to connect them together. That is why I will go in and create another relation to the case, and just name the field accordingly, which will give us possibility to have the connection between those data and also to link all the things together. Let me add some representative measures here. Maybe case number will come here. Okay, and one small notice on that as well. What we have done for the participants, we have created separate table, and we have the notices here linked, but what we are missing again is to have the participants binding to the parties as well. So by this I want to show, first of all, that the relation between different entities, which might be not only simple ones, but also complex entities like parties, are possible to be done from here. Again, let me call it. Sorry. Okay. And then we bind it to the parties and mark it again as an indexing field, and choose the name as the representation of the party. Okay, so now we are all set with defining the knowledge, and the next step, as you mentioned correctly, David, is for us to go and to create the forms for it. That is said, now we need to define what user interfaces is going to be there for the end users. If you remember, at the beginning of our session, Khachatur has showed you the letter of calling of heads of argument. Let us just quickly find it, because here we can find all the forms which are already there existing. So let me find that. And let us open it to see what we are going to achieve by the end of this exercise. Okay, you see here, we have the header part of it, we have the buttons for the functionalities to save and close, and etc. We have this beautiful control here, which will show us the process through which the letter will be passed. And then we see different tabs, one or many, and then we can have cards here, we can have fields enabled in here. So what we are going to achieve now is to create the same for the notices. So let's go quickly to forms and create a new one. We just press on create new form, and it displays for us all possible list of entities or based on the knowledge that we have described. Okay, let me just quickly find our notices. It was for the webinar notice. And then what I want to do is to select which type of form I'm going to create. Khachatur has explained that we can have different form types for viewing the information and also for modifying the information. So let's start with maybe edit mode, and then let's call it accordingly. And then we can have some description here as well, describe the form, and then we press just on create button. Right away we are headed to the new builder. I will introduce it to you. This is the form builder, and on the right side there are several controls and possibilities that we can use to create and organize the page the way we want it to be presented to the end users at the end. So we can start with the header. You can see that there is already a ready-to-go component here. When I drag and drop it, automatically all those necessary buttons, which are common for every single entity or for every single record, appears here. To save the notice, to save and close the notice, or to cancel the modifications I have done. And there is no need again for developers, for the backend developers or frontend developers to go and then redefine everything. The functionality is ready here, and the functionality is embedded along with the header control. Then we can use the subway map control, which is, as I explained, will show us eventually the process through which this specific notice will pass through. We can have tabs. For example, I can call the new tab accordingly. Let us call it something like general info. I can add other tabs as well. Then what I can do is I can use the already defined knowledge in here. What does that mean? So we describe the knowledge, and automatically Synergy Case Platform will hint the administrators to use those definitions and those fields on the form. What we need is just to drag and drop the fields and manipulate with them and design the form the way we want it. We can even rename the field. Let us call it maybe notice subject. We can also define other properties. Allow me just to skip them for now. Quickly, I will say that we can have some hints there. We can have a number of characters shown, or we can have tooltips. We can have even conditions, complex ones, to show or not to hide or to show the field on the form for the specific conditions. Let us drag and drop other fields as well. We had notice type. We can actually organize the way we want. We can change the position of the field. We can resize the field. We can align them. And then we can pull and see here the date of notice. Let us bring it along with the notice type. And also, besides these controls that you have just seen, and also the fields that we have described in the knowledge, there are other controls as well. Again, these are ready-to-go solutions, and we could just drag and drop the controls in here and then use appropriate properties to do everything faster and in a more effective way. Like this control, I think this is my favorite one, is for the party picker. We know that it was a common thing that for every single, maybe not every single, but mostly the legal templates that we have are referred to some participants of the case. So now it is very easy from here to define which kind of parties we want to be selected for the notices. System hints us to select whether this is case main parties, or maybe these are other participants or advocates of the case, or representatives or initiators, and etc. So the variety of the possibilities here gives us quick configuration ability to have whatever we want to build in the form right away. We can even select this is a multi-select component, or only one recipient can be there for the notice or no. Okay, so let us keep the form simple. Those were the fields that we have created, and I will save the edit form for now. Now what I need to do after defining the form, I will have also to define the view form. David, maybe you will allow me quickly to create the view form as well. Our guests might be able to follow the process.
Thank you, Karina. Actually, to brief what we just did, for the notice, we created already the database. So using the builder, the special builder developed in Synergy case, we were able to define the knowledge, which automatically created the fields in the database. So before, if I make a comparison, what we would have years ago, we would need the specialized database developer to build all this. And after, whatever Karina is doing now, we would need a front-end developer to create it inside the application. But through the builders, with just simple drag and drops and using the library of different controls, all this logic is possible to do from the user interface using the Synergy case. And this has two advantages. First of all, if there is any new form which comes out, a new legal template, so it can be implemented and it wouldn't require a very sophisticated development process. But at the same time, courts are actually, and all justice sector institutions, the processes may change, the requirements may change. And through the builders, like we are now creating new items, so the administrators would be able to maintain themselves and they would be able to make the modifications whenever there are any changes in the laws or new requirements for new type of data to be captured. And instead of every time going and hiring developers or making sophisticated effort, those could be done through the user interface, as David told, through a team of well-trained EK system analysts. David?
Thank you, Pachatur, for the explanation of what just happened. I, as a non-technical person, already understand that the form of the notice is available both in the backend and front end. Now, how do we bring this inside the case and show it in a user-friendly way to make it convenient for end users when navigating the case? Because as you understand, cases contain a lot of information and it could be overwhelming for someone to try to find something specific that they need. Maybe Karina can help hear us?
Sure, David. Again, referring back to the view of the case we saw. So let us do the bindings and let us do the customization so that we have another card in here, and then we can keep all the records and also have the records table. Again, referring back to the example Hachatur showed to you, we want also to have this kind of records of table for the notices as well. For that, let us quickly go to the administration and also to go to the configuration menu where we can configure records table here. All the records table which already there in the system are coming from here, and they might be modified in the future upon maintaining them as per the need. We now will create a new one. We will select our category, our notices. Or maybe let me just quickly open the one that I have defined before and show how it will look for the sake of the time. I have already created an example here for the notices, predefined notices, and I have already pulled some information. How do I do that? I just have the list of columns in here. I can add new columns. I will select from the existing knowledge again. I can choose, for example, date of created. I can remove some of the fields, for example, who has updated it. I will define all specific columns, and then there is no need for, again, developers to go and to construct the records table accordingly. Very often we had the need to also have filtering criteria on the records of table whenever there are many. For that, we also have a solution. For filtering every single column that is here, we can use three types of filters, either default filters, advanced filters, or quick filters. Again, very quickly, I will not go into the details for every single type, but I will just say that default filters are the ones which we need to have whenever we open the records table at the beginning. For example, I don't want on the records table to see the draft ones, or I don't want to see the specific type of the record, the notices. For example, I don't want to see the notices for the submission in here, and I will construct a separate one for them. I will just use today the advanced filter, which is on pressing on this button, the users will be prompted to select either for the date of notice, for the type, or for the subject, and then we can even pick new fields to be possible for the users to filter. I don't know, let us also select the date of updated. And this way, we are doing nothing more than that. Whenever I save this information in here, everything will be created for the records table. What I need to do next is to go to the summary configuration of the page, that is for the summary pages, to see what configuration has been done for the case. You see, this is the customization portion of the view that we have seen now, just recently, and all those cards are defined and customized through here. What I do, I just create a new one. I might create different types of them. Because our notices are going to be the group cards, I will select that one to group everything together and then to have them in one place, nice and tidy. I will select the appropriate entity, the titles, and etc. But let me open quickly again the example that I have created, just to save the time, and I will explain what has been done. For example, the previous notices, this is the name of the card, this is the category which is binded to it for the notices, of course. This is the records table we just was reviewing through. We can have an icon, we can change the icon accordingly. There is a variety of icons and those might be added as well. We can define what kind of information we want to see on the card. Like here in the back end, you see that there is 3 types of categorization of the number of entities which are in here. For example, we want to see number of finalized notices, number of draft notices or ongoing notices. And we also can define the order of the card in the whole bunch of the cards or in the whole bunch of the folders that we have here. After that, we save it and then it appears in here as a new card, and when we save all this, the case information will be updated accordingly. David?
That looked really smooth, Karine. So let's move to the next item of our exercise, the business processes. I know documents go through certain processes in the organizations, and judiciary is included. They are created, they are approved, they are moved on to another department. We need to understand first what this looks like in real life. And Khachatur, please help us understand this process. And after that, I'll ask Karine to digitalize this process in the system. Khachatur?
Thank you, David. Whenever we speak about case management systems and their working process, so for justice sector institutions, there is always a process governing the case, and there are always rules or guidelines how this process should be done. For example, if we bring the high-level example on the court processes, there is always a process where the litigants or advocates submit files to the court, then the court make the admissibility analysis, then the payment is done, for example, they schedule hearings, they make the pronouncement of the file. So all this can be coupled into different stages, and this is what is called the workflow process. So one thing which is must for any case management system is to have the processes defined. What the experience showed us, having implemented dozens of case management systems for judiciaries and other justice sector institutions in all continents worldwide, is that there is a process, a high-level process for the cases, but every single document can have its own process, and the way it is being moved from one person to another within the same institution in scope of the same case. For example, if we take the example of the notice, the registrar in the court can create the notice and submit it to the parties or recipients. But in other jurisdictions or in another country, the process can be different. So the assistant of the registrar can create its draft and then give it to the registrar for review. And if everything is fine, registrar can accept it and then send. So a key component for every system should be possibility to define the process and link it with the case or with a specific group of documents to which it may apply. David?
Well noted, Khachatur. So now let's go back to Karine. Karine, please guide us through the action that will allow us to digitalize this business process in Synergy eCase for our electronic notice of filing form, which I hear is one of the biggest components in our implementations.
Thank you, David. For that, again, for the Synergy eCase platform, we have specific section for the business processes to set up. And we have this menu for the processes. When I click on it, all the processes related to different compartments or components of the case will appear here. And now let us go and create a new process for our notices. I just find it from the list, and then I press on create button. At the end of the list, the new process appears, and what can I do here is to define the process from scratch. Now you see that there are no states, you see that there are no transitions yet, everything is ready for us to start building the whole process. Okay, but before that, allow me quickly to go to the definition of the knowledge, and let's understand what has happened to the knowledge after creating a process for it. When we create a process, automatically in the system, new fields will be generated, not only in the knowledge but also in the database, for keeping the workflow states, for keeping the actions that were done on the notices, and for keeping the comments which are appropriate for doing the actions. Again, there is no need for the developers or for the administrator to go and again create every single thing, which of course will appear there automatically. Now let's jump again to the processes, and let's open the process and let us define it according to Khachatur's description. So first of all, we need to add new states in here. Let us call it draft 1. This will be the stage when possibly the assigned assistant of the registrar will define the notice to prepare it later on for the registrar attention and for the registrar approval. The next state will be probably pending of approval. Let us call it accordingly. And the last state for us will be for the approved stages of the notices. And I will also highlight it as a final stage, so that on the card we will see everything nice and tidy, collected together for every single notice. Okay, now we need to define also the transitions to move the notice from the draft stage into the pending approval stage, and we will just need to name the transition. Let us call it send for approval. And then the next stage that we are going to have is to define the transition after when it appears to the pending of approval to move it to approved. Let us call it approved. Okay, and David, that is that simple. We have defined the process and we can just now save it, and automatically Synergy eCase platform will understand upon creation of the notices that these are the stages available for it to flow through. David?
Karine, I would like to highlight a very interesting fact for the moment. Just under 45 minutes, we have made configurations in our database. We have connected it with our front end. We created the electronic form of our notice of filing, and we set up its business process. So now we are in a situation where our case is digital, the notice is digital. This, however, does not exclude the possibility that the court staff would still need to have the legal template to print it and to use it for their own purposes, to publish it somewhere, to send it to someone physically, etc., etc. How do we get this, Karine?
Yes, David, you are absolutely right. And happens very often, not only for the paper version, but also for electronically signed documents to be there and to appear after everything is recorded, and then it will be just exported from the system. Let us go through it and to understand how we can construct it. So we go to the user interface, and then we go to the templates menu. And we here are listed with all the templates that are already in the system and already in use. Now we are going to create a new one, and by pressing create button again we are going to bind it to our notices, and then we will give it a name. We will give it a description. Because we can have multiple templates, that is why sometimes the description is very important to put in here. When I press on the save button, then I'm hinted with this beautiful editor menu. I think all those functionalities you see on the screen are pretty common for bolding the text, for making it italic, for aligning it, for creating some tables on the form, for formatting it, and for resizing, making the color and highlight it, and etc. But let us remember how the template looked like in the first place, and let us try to reflect the same into the system. So here, first of all, we had the logo. Let us try to put that. We have here the menu to embed the pictures on the menu. Let me quickly find the logo. This one, and now it is there. The next portion for us will be, again going back to the template, will be to define the name of the court in here, in the above. We can say that we will type, or we will have at the end exported the name, but in order for it not to be typed every time by the user, we will bring the data right from the database, and that is why we will just use a binding functionality of this template builder to pull the data from the case and to pull the data from the court name that is already defined in the case. So for that reason, I will select the case, and then I will find the court. And what I need to do, I will just say that we want the name of the court to appear in here. So this is simple binding functionality, which will bring the data from the database, and upon exporting the information, it will be replaced dynamically in the export template. The next portion of it was the address, and then it was the notice of filing, which is the type of the notice which should appear here. We can simply, again, bind it to the notice template and define that here the notice type will appear. We'll say that this is a notice type, we will bring the name of it. We can even make some modifications in the alignment, in the size of it, and etc. But I have good news for you. All this will take a lot of time. That is why we will remove everything, and we will use another possibility which is pretty much simple, and we will just import the Word document into the builder and just fine-tune a few fields to just bind them from the database to fill accordingly. Let us select our form, and here you go. All the structure and alignments and the sizes are already done on behalf of the administrator based on the Word template, legal template that we have received from the client. Now again, quickly I will bind the missing fields to have not just static text in it, but dynamically edit fields from here. So again, we will go to the case, we will use the court name, we will apply it. Here it comes the address of the court. Again, we will bind it with this binding possibility. We will define it from the case, and then we will pull the registry, which is actually keeping the address of the court. The next thing here is it is written the notice of filing, but as I said, the types of notices might be variety, And that's why we will again pull here the type of the notice right from the notice definition. And we will pull the name in here. Then it comes the case number, again from the cases. Then it comes the date. This one is also a good example. Let me bring the date into here from the notices and see that date of notice are possible to be displayed by different formats. Let us just choose one. Again, this is pretty much familiar formats to everyone, I think, and so on and so forth. So here the recipients are coming, this is the subject of the notice, this is the registration date of the case, and etc. So on and so forth. Again, David, to save your time, allow me to show the ready example, which will be finally used for us. I have already created one. This is the final result, and all the fields which should be pulled from the database are already binded here dynamically, and all the customizations on the template is done. This is the template that we have defined, and one last point to do is to bind it to the form. If we go to the forms and we find the one which we have just created, that is the user interface, we will just look through it. We will edit. We will open one of the modes, and then what we are going to do is to bind it from the header. We will click on the header component, and here we are prompted with possibilities to add some templates, whichever are available in the system. So this is the template. You remember we have created that. And then we can choose which format we want the template to be exported with. It might be a PDF, it might be Word one, RTF or XLS, and etc. Let us just quickly use maybe two of them. Once again, there are much more properties and varieties to define here, but I will again just quickly hint that we can duplicate the template upon the go, and then every single user can have their personalized templates based on their preferences or based on their style of work. We can have QR code generated on the template, which is a very useful thing because it is a unique QR code which is readable from the system itself only. So there is no place for falsification, and we have mitigated the risks of reusing that type. So this is that generation. Again, these few steps here, and the template is binding to the form, and we are ready to move on. David?
That looks very impressive, Karina. Well done. I would like to use this moment to encourage our participants to ask questions in the chat. Remember, we will have a Q&A session in the end dedicated to this. I think so far we have seen enough to trigger your curiosity on these topics. So we established that the functionality is there and the data is there to get to the final result. Electronic form with its document template is attached to the case, which can also be downloaded. Now let's have a look at the responsibilities of the court staff regarding handling this digital form and their interactions with that. Khachatur, what would we need to pay attention to here? And let's have a quick talk about the role-based access and its overall security relevance.
Yes, David. Actually, when we speak about the case management systems for justice sector, one key component is that those are called role-based workflow-driven applications, which means that, yes, Karina showed how we can name it the data capturing and visualization side has been done. But one key thing is to understand who should have access to it, who can process the notice that is created. So this is who has the permissions to do actions and which fields at which state can be modified. The idea is that when it comes to requirements, we can say that when it's draft and I created the notice, I can modify it. But when we say that the notice is already approved, the assistant cannot make any changes to it. So if we transfer this to a knowledge or to a requirement, it would be that the case management system should have possibility to define the permissions at the level of each field and at the stage of at each stage of the process. So Role-based access is key, and another example is when the judge, for example, needs to create the copy of the judgment or an order. No one should have access to it, only himself or herself. And when already it's published, more users should have access to it, but the modification permission should be removed. So now let's see how this can be done from the system perspective. David?
Yes, Khachatur. So let's have a look at how Synergy eCase has to offer to set up users' permissions and roles for our electronic form. Karinem?
Sure, David. Let me guide you through our security module, which is again pretty enhanced. As Khachatur has mentioned, it is not just role-based, but it is also workflow and attribute-based permissions, which we will provide to different type of roles in here. So as mentioned by Khachatur, I will find the assistant registrar in the list of roles that we have in the system, and then I will go on and will define the permissions as per Khachatur's description. There are a variety of possibilities here again, but let us skip that part for the sake of the time. I will just jump quickly to the workflow actions to define the permission for the assistant registrar to make several actions on the notices. Let us find the notice that we created, and when I expand it, I will see all the workflow states that are possible to be defined here. Maybe just allow the system to refresh quickly. So that we can define what specific permissions might be there for the notices. Or maybe, okay, here you see the stages that I have defined, the draft one to the pending approval one, which will be done by taking the send for approval action. And for the assistant of registrar, I will select only this action, and I will not allow assistant of the registrar to make the approval. So I will not check the other permission here. So this is the workflow part. But in addition to that, we will also need to define which specific information at which specific state needs to be modified or needs to be viewed by the registrar. Again, let us quickly find our notices, and here we see two toggles. One is to enable the permissions by the workflows, the other to enable it by fields, and we can even define both for the workflows and for the fields. Here, quite complex and useful for all possible scenarios, permission set will be provided to the administrator. That is said, to reflect what Khachatur's scenarios was, we want the assistant of the registrar, whenever the notices is in draft state, to modify and to view everything on the notices. Whereas, if it is already under the pending approval or approved stage, we don't want him to make any modifications, but we can still allow him to view some information, maybe all the fields, maybe some of the fields should be skipped from him, like the last action comment which was made there by the registrar, or any other field. And what we do next, we just save this information, and that is all to set up the permissions actually. Now, whenever a user of an assistant registrar role will log in into the system, they will be able to create notices, and they will be able to send these notices for the registrar approvals only, and they will not be able to do modifications moving on. David?
Yes, Karina, that was really quick. So our notice is ready, its template is ready, and the permissions and the security aspect is also set up. So now I imagine that parties of the case need to be communicated about the template, the form, etc., etc. Now I know that registry books and journals to track the movement of the outgoing documents are the usual tools to do this in the judiciaries. But we want to replicate this as well in our system. So how do we quickly configure this process to electronically notify people about that? What's the behind-scenes work you need to do here?
Sure, David. Let me jump into the notifications section of the Synergy eCase platform. Again, using the processes, we will define a notification template. That is said, we want to define, first of all, how this notification received by a certain user should look like. You see again every single notification that is already in the system are listed here, and we are just adding a new one. We are hinted to name it. Let us call it somehow notice notification, and then we will give it a key. And also define whether the context of the notification should be based on a certain entity. Yes, we want so, because we want it to be collecting some information and then distributing from the notices we created. So we choose it. And also we can enable the user information for the notices whenever they are sent. Some information from the user portion will be also embedded in there. Now, the administrators will choose whether this is a system notification, maybe email notification, maybe this is an SMS notification. So let us for now keep the system one and the email notification, and let's move on and describe the details. We can even attach some documents whenever we distribute the notifications to the users when they are receiving it through email. Whereas the system notifications are the ones which appear for the user in here, on the upper side of the menu under this ring sign. Now let's define the details of the notification. Let's define the subject for it. Maybe something that you have a new notice. And then we will have to define the body. I have prepared a small one for you. So this is the notice which says dear, and then we expect the name of the recipient to come here. That is why, again, by using binding tool, let us dynamically bind the information so that upon sending the information, the platform will incorporate all necessary information for specific records and display the corresponding recipient name in here. So let's select from the list of recipients and then find the recipient itself, and then display maybe the name of the recipient. We can also have here all possible other fields which we already have in the parties defined. So we are just adding it, and dynamically it will be added on the notice template. Here we have a notice of filing has been issued to you by user. So let us do this way. We will pull here from the database the information of the user who has approved it. That is said, this is the user who made the update on the notice last, and then we will just choose the name of that user in here. And that's it. The system notification is configured. We can, of course, have separate type of template for the email, which will be more extended, or the format will be different. But for now, again, for our exercise, let's say that this template is the same for email as well. And then we press on Create button. So now the template is there, and the only thing we miss is to define the automation rule that is said when the system should generate and what should the system do with this notification. Let's go to the automation menu. There are several rules in here which are working upon their setup and upon enabling them. And then again, no developer needs to do any specific job in here to send out the notifications. So let us call the rule. Maybe it will be the rule for our notices. We will bind it to our notices. We will keep it enabled, and then we will say what should trigger this automation rule. That is said, what should happen so that this notification is sent. There are a variety of possibilities here, but for our case, we will choose that we want to have it on a transition whenever the notification is approved. So, whenever the notification is approved, we have other conditions like if the date of notice is not missed, or if the type of notice is specifically notice of filing, or other conditions which might be applicable for the business needs, we will define in the conditions section. And the last one is the action. We will choose that we want the system to send the notification. We can also have to change the transition, that is set to change the state of the notices, or any other custom actions that might be defined. So when we click on the notifications, right away the template that we have created will be hinted for us to choose, and then we should say who should be the recipient of this notification. We can choose from the list of users. Let us go to the recipients list, and then let us find the users which are binded to it, and say that we want to send the notification to the user of this recipient. Okay, and for just viewing purposes, let me also add a specific user, which will be mine, to just see at the header whenever a new notice will be received by us. So we create this action as well, and then we save the rule. David, so this is all for setting the notification and the rule as well, and everything will work upon triggering this action whenever that specific properties will be in place.
Well noted, Karine. I usually get asked about the status of notifications and verifying that, because in physical setup, as you understand, when a party of a case is notified about something, they get that notice, they sign it, and it serves as a proof of receipt. How do we replicate this in our system, and how we track that our notifications are sent, are delivered, or maybe not? So let's go one step even further. How about tracking not only the notification logs, but also any activity on our case?
Sure, David. Let me share my screen again and guide you through that. You mentioned very correctly that this is a common need from the client side. That is why we had a ready-to-go solution here as well. So we go to the forms of the notices that we created, and then we can say that we want, for example, to have a new tab in here where we will pull additional information regarding what activities have been done on the notices, or what notifications have been sent, whether they have been received or no. So let us quickly configure this, again by dragging and dropping ready-to-go controls, which we already have in here embedded. We will see the activity log, and also let me find the notification log, which will hint all emails or system notifications or SMS notifications which are sent out. Not only they will be displayed here, but the status of them will be shown as well. If, for example, for some purposes the email is not correct or the email is not delivered, then we will get the appropriate status in the form right away. So after doing this, maybe allow me to go to the cases and see what we have got and how we are going to be displayed with that notification, and also the activity log. Let me quickly open the case, which is already familiar to you. Let me go to the notices section. You already see that there are several records in here. All of them will be gathered together in this records table. And now let us create a new notice. We will choose the notice type. We will choose the date of the notice. Maybe the subject will come here. Let us have a subject here, notice of filing for the applicant. And then we can choose from the list of parties which are already part of the case to define to whom we are going to send the notice to. Maybe let us choose Tom. And we can save this. This will be actually done by the assistant of the registrar. At the header side, you see that it is in a draft stage. And now what he or she will do, is to send the notice for the registrar's attention. That is said, he will take the action from the right upper corner to send it for review. Registrar on its place, when he will see this information, he might edit it, he might look through it, or he might even export the template which was created. download or preview it, and then he will look through the exported notification. He will make sure that everything is generated correctly in here. Every single detail satisfies the needs, and after that he can just modify the information and add it to the list of the documents right in here. Let us have it one of them. When the document is added, there are extra possibilities in here to sign the document, maybe put some personal signature in it. He can define the signature from here somehow, and then we'll place the signature on the file and sign the document electronically. Or they can just have some information, download it or remove it, and etc. All the possibilities are here. So now the registrar will be ready to send the notification to approve the notice, and also to send the notification, which will be done by the Synergy case platform automatically based on our automation rules. And to come back to your question, this is the additional information which we receive for this notice template, for this notice record. You can see that everything which has been done by me is recorded here, what has been created, what has been viewed, what has been updated, when and who did so. And also you can see at the bottom the log for the notifications sent out. Like you see that the recipient is receiving this email, and also me as an administrator receiving this email, and also the system notification. And you see my ring bell in the upper corner. I can press on that and I can view the details of the notice which was received by me as a user. I think that is the answer to your question, David.
Yes, Karine, thank you. Thank you, and thank you, Khachatur, as well. This brings us to the end of our session today. Before going into the Q&A part, I would like to highlight a few things here as a conclusion to what we saw. First of all, we tried to show you today that developing case management systems is not as complex as it sounds. The resources that go into this exercise can be very affordable. Secondly, having experienced teams and tested technology platforms for implementation is the key. So expertise and past performance have to be your key metrics for evaluation of your contractors. The last but not the least is the independence and empowerment of your organization when owning the final system. Your teams should be able to modify, configure, and maintain these systems after the implementation, which will free you from the vendor both financially and technically. We have a few options and formats of knowledge transfer to your teams to bring this to life. So for more on this, we'll be happy to have one-on-one discussions with interested participants. Our technology also allows us to train interested IT and consulting companies to use it for their own project implementations. So we would be happy to talk to you as well on this topic. For the next year, we are planning to launch our training courses for people to learn how to use Synergy eCase and its builders to create their own systems and become Synergy certified system analysts. Stay tuned to receive updates on that. Now let me go through some of the questions and raise them for our speakers to answer. I'm afraid we won't be able to answer all your questions today, but we'll be happy to get back to you via email and send you the responses. One of the questions that I got asked personally is the following. So imagine that, so we saw Karine did so many configurations and changes. She created different entities and components. In our implementation process, how are we managing the changes that we make between different environments? Technologically, let's say we have a testing environment, we have a live environment, we have a production environment. How we transfer these configurations and changes from one environment to the other? Maybe Khachatur will help us with this question. Please.
Thank you, David. Actually, a very key component during the development is you may have different environments. You may have one environment where you do the actual development and customization. Then you may have another environment of the application where you will be doing the testing. And also you can, after the administrator makes, It can update the release, so there already the registrars and court users, for example, can check if everything is correct. And when everything is complete, you should take those package of changes to the production environment, to the live system. So one thing is when you are doing it through hard coding, you update the releases. So you execute different script, you update the versions, and this process is sophisticated and can take a lot of effort. But for most of the things that Karine has actually shown, we also have functionality, so-called the change management, which facilitates the management of different environments. So if I make a very quick screen sharing, so in the administration module, one of the components is so-called the change management, which gives possibility to create and extract different changes that have happened within the system. So when Karine was creating the database, so from this environment, we can define which exact entities we want to export and create the export package, and then move the export package from this environment, and then in the other environment import this one. So with this way the process becomes complete. So user, the administrator who has corresponding permission, can create the change package and export it from one development environment and send it to the testing environment, making sure whatever has been done, we have made changes in the database, in the web forms, in the Word document. All this package of changes can be exported and then transferred. David?
Thank you, Khachatur. The next question that I got asked is the duration of implementation during the for using the builders and the configuration modules of Synergy eCase. So if you compare it with traditional hard-coded systems, what would be the time difference between implementing a standard, let's say, case management system for the judiciary between a hard-coded system and a system like Synergy eCase?
Thank you, David. Actually, the biggest advantage is that the customization through ready components and ready requirements fastens the process several times. And the big advantage that this gives is not that you have the system sooner, but you are able to engage the court users earlier. One of the nationwide case management system, using the builders and this new approach, instead of 6 months, we were able to deliver the first release in 2 months, which gave the judiciary possibility within the upcoming months to be trained, to test the system, to modify wherever it's needed, and the fastening of the development and customization process helps to have a more ready and final system in less time than it was before. David?
Once again, thank you, Khachatur, and thank you, Karine. This is all the time that we have for questions. I want to thank our participants for their time and attendance. We will publish the recording of the webinar in English, French, and Spanish on YouTube and send it to you individually very soon. Again, for the questions that we did not answer, we will definitely get back to you individually. Once again, if you want to have more in-depth discussions and system demos, we will be happy to organize that. Feel free to reply to one of the emails you received from me. Look forward to staying in touch and hope to have you in our next webinars. Thank you and goodbye.